Howdy, everybody. Welcome back to my views from Town with your old buddy Bruce. And this may be a bit of a long one because I'm going to get into religion, what I think about it. So don't get all puffed up and teed off. Just my views, okay? It has nothing to do with anything. I'm no, expert on any of this. Just my personal views. Now, my family was not religious when I grew up. We never went to church. We never did prayers at meals. We never talked about religion, nothing. So the road I have used to come to what I think of religion is my own life experience and all the readings I have done over the course of my adult life, learning about and understanding the history of religion and the various religions of the world. And God knows there's a lot of them. So I'll try to just blast through it as best I can without getting real specific to anything, okay? First off, I believe that all religions of earth are created by humans for humans. I don't believe there is any divinity behind any of them. Now, why would I say that? I look back in time and I think of, the early humans, little tribes, right? Hunter gatherer tribes. And they're out there in the world fighting with all the other predators, right? The big bears, the big cats, and so on, to survive, right? And those guys could turn on them and chew on them just as easy. It takes a while for man to start to develop, tools, tactics, and strategies where they slowly could start to take dominance over the other predators to some degree in that environment. But in the beginning, they're no better than anybody else, right? And they probably would look at like the big bears and the big cats and stuff and think they are the top of the line. That's the real guy. But they would live in a world where there's a commonality about everything, right? Everyone lives in the same planet. The sun rises and falls. The stars come out. The rains come. The fires come. Volcanoes, you name it. It's all the same. It all happens to all of them. All the animals on the planet. And so there's a symbiosis there. And humans have this innate desire for a spirituality, right? To try to have a better understanding of the universe around them. So they start to create this, vision of the other animals as being like them, right? The paintings on the cave walls, this and that, they do little ceremonies and they respect the other, predators for what they are. They give them respect. They don't want to just go abject out there and kill one, because that's, you need to respect that creature for who that creature is and what that creature does. And the same with the prey, right? The prey lay down their lives so that you can have food to survive. That's their role in all of this, right? And they do it willingly, unerringly, all the time. And so you come to have a deep respect for them as well. Because you've got this yin and this yang, if you will, these two things that have to go through together and survive together and depend on each other to survive, even though that survival is an animalistic, brutal, non-caring survival, right? I mean, killing another animal is not an easy thing to do. I don't think. I would not want to do it. But of course, as time goes by, the clever humans start to pop up, right? The guys who put together two and two and figure out how to control and make fire, how to start making tools, what the star movements, this sort of stuff, And so these guys aren't stupid. I mean, they realized that, I could take all of this. And I'm sure not all of them did this. There were some who were probably, did like a peyote trip or something and were really true to themselves. They had a trip or something. But I think most of this, kind of quasi religious setup. I'm going to worship the bear, the bear king, the tiger king, the moon king, the sun king, the water king, the fire king. Right? All this comes out of this symbiosis, this sense of symbiotic relationship and continued dependence through time, so that we are always connected, we are always shared over time. Now, a clever guy like that gets that idea going, and now he's got a great means if he can tag up with the big alpha dog fighter dudes, hunter guys. And he can hook up with them. Now they can create a pretty formidable group that can begin to manipulate and control the rest of the group, right? Because through the religion, you can set up all sorts of things that you want them to do in their daily lives. This is how I want you to live, right? You're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do this. And if you don't do these things, bad things are going to happen to our king and then to us. Whatever it is. And they can predict certain things happening so people believe they have the knowledge. Right? And at that moment, they do. So this is, from the very beginning, religion and human leadership are bound together over time. And you look back in history and show me, how many of the major civilizations back in what we call the ancient times, right? The ancient Indians, right? Egyptians, Mesopotamians, all those guys, everybody back way, 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 way back. Show me one that didn't have a state religion. They did. And they had their court with the king or emperor or whatever, and their army, and that was kind of the deal. Everybody else were like rank and file citizens who did their thing and paid homage to the big boys, so the big boys would protect them and tell them what to do, and they could all go on through life happily. I mean, that's kind of where this was. And you get to a point, and excuse me, it's my disease. You get to Mesopotamia, the Greater Levant, whatever you want to call it, back in a particular period of time there, right around the time, say the Hebrews are coming around, later on the Christians, and then Islam, so forth, right? Because those are three very related religions, the Abrahamic religions. So now I'm going to start with the Hebrews. Now, if you look back at that time, we're talking maybe, I think everybody would agree on like 500, 700 BC, somewhere like that, Now, everything in the Middle East back then was basically like a mafia state, if you can think about it like that. Because Bob over there had his little city-state, and, Mary had hers, and John had his, and Billy had his, and they were all doing their own little thing, but each one had different rules, different whatever, could have different religions, could have different, ways of exacting taxes, so forth and so on. And of course, as one of the city-state people would get big enough and bad enough, they'd think about knocking off the guy next door. And, I'm sure it didn't, it doesn't happen like exactly like this, but I can sure it was not far off the bat, where you'd have a guy from one city-state go on a visit to the other guy and say, we could come up with an arrangement because, I got a bunch of guys who come through here kind of on a regular basis, and if they were to get upset or too tired, I mean, I can't really control what they might do, to you. Break a few glasses, I don't know, rape a few women, whatever, But, hey, if we could come to like an agreement where you become like, subservient to me, well, then my guys will treat you real nice and we'll all get along and you just, give me a cut of your action, keep me informed, and I'll tell you what to do and we'll all be happy. Right? The old, give them an offer they can't refuse. Either that or it could be, or, I'll just send my guys in here and we'll just destroy your whole place and kill you and take everybody we can for slaves. That's an option. Or you could, I guess, just pack up and leave. You could do that. Because if you look back in history, this is how all these things start changing. But, the problem is, of course, you're surrounded by big dogs, right? You got Egypt down south, and you got the, what were they now? Escaping my mind. Later on they would be Babylonians, but that was much later. But Assyrians, I think it was, maybe the Assyrians, up in the north, and the Egyptians in the south. And of course that was always a problem because, the Egyptians have a pharaoh who's young, eager to spread his wings. He wants to spread his territory. So he goes out and he knocks off the whole southern region of the Middle East. Oh boy, Well, there goes, all the dreams and aspirations of those guys. And then the Assyrians go, well, I think he took a little bit too much, and so they come and they push back. And so now everybody's under Assyrian control for a while. It was Egyptian, and it goes back and forth, and they both leave everybody alone. And you go through this rock and roll scenario, this little ride, at a carnival affair. And that's how it goes. And no one in the Middle East is ever strong enough and wise enough to really pull that whole region together as one cohesive unit, which is why we don't have one there today, frankly, in my opinion. So, I look back at the Hebrews, okay? So the Hebrews go, look, this is horrible. I hate living like this. I'm one of the peasants, so life is pretty shitty for me, pardon my language. God, I wish I could change the rules of the game, make things fairer, nicer, evener, all this, whatever. But when you're thinking back then, how are you going to affect change, really? Are you going to raise enough money to raise an army and go take somebody out? Probably not. Are you going to rise above the ranks of the social classes and become one of the great generals or something? And take on a group that way? Probably not. Really, the only viable way you had at that time to try and cause any kind of social upheaval, social rebellion, was religion. If you could get enough people to believe in and sign on to a new religion, you could shake the system up. No question about it. So like with the Hebrews, for example, they go out and they find a nice piece of land and say, okay, we're going to start our own little city here. And they do, and they set it up and they run it for quite a while. And, they're figuring out what they like for laws and, what they don't like about this or that and why they want to do things this way or that way. And, they go along. But then eventually they have an argument amongst themselves. There's a group that wants to go one way. These guys in a spiritual sense want to go another. So they split, right? We have the split of the tribes that is talked about, I think. This is how I'm just interpreting it. Right? Now they go off and they start a whole nother Hebrew city. So it's totally different. Has its own little laws and so forth, but you can tell they're the same, right? There's very much, the basic rules, laws, everything about the religions and the rule of law are all pretty much the same, right? So they all kind of hang there. But then, here comes one of those old God expansion things, right? And the first city, they go and they say, hey, you want to cut a deal? No, we're Hebrews. We're on our own. Go away. We'll attack you. We'll defend. Bad choice. They get wiped off the face of the earth. Thrown to the winds, never be heard from again. And these, I think, are the origins of the myth of the lost tribes of Israel. Because there is historic evidence that a small city did exist back in that time. And there's evidence in that city, that they didn't eat certain meats, that their pottery was done in a very particular, simplistic sort of way, right? And other little artifacts around that might indicate perhaps these people were developing the Jewish religion. But nothing was written down yet. Nothing had been codified, right? So, they get whacked, and that's that for them. The other guys, they avoid the hands at this point. But, several hundred years later, along come the Babylonians. They're now one of the big dogs. And the Babylonians, they just kind of operate differently, So they go into this second Jewish city. And they say, now we're going to destroy you. Just because, that's what we do. But, we're going to take some slaves. We'll rape a few people. We'll kill some people. We'll do some pillaging. But, those of you who you would consider men of learning, village leaders, men of skill, right? Carpenters, people who do fabric work, stone work, metal work, whatever it might be. We don't want to kill you guys and destroy you. We are going to take you back to our little Babylonia, and we're going to give you an area of land where you can just be yourselves. Because we want to get to know you, and we want to get to understand and share and basically steal, all the great things you know how to do and the things that you know about the world. Yeah, that's a little different than everybody else, right? So when this happens, the Hebrew leaders say, woo, okay, before this goes away, we better start writing this whole thing down. We better make our religion legit. And that's when they start writing the religion down. So that's when all the stuff about Moses and Abraham and all that stuff gets written, is way back then. Not when it actually happened. We're talking long, hundreds and thousands of years after the time it would have potentially actually occurred. So these are just myths, but they're the myths they want to found their culture on and their religion on. So great, go ahead. And that's what they do, and they survive as a culture. Through that, all of that, the Hebrews survive, which you got to give them credit. A lot of them, little religious startups and so forth like that, didn't make it anywhere near that far. And here they are still one of the largest, most viable religions in the world. And you can't knock that. I mean, that's quite an achievement. Now, yes, the Christians come along next, but they're still doing the same thing, I think. It's not about Jesus and this and that. They're looking, we don't like the Hebrew hierarchy. They got them fat and lazy. We don't like them. We got some better ideas. We want to go with them. And so they run rogue. And that's when you get the the Christian religion. Right? For no other reason. Wasn't any sort of three wise men sitting in a manger going, oh, look at this kid. Wasn't that. Really wasn't that. And Islam is even further down the Christian path, because that's a guy who was fighting a civil war to unite what is now Saudi Arabia. And he used religion. So he basically borrowed the underpinnings of the standard Christian and Hebrew religion, the Abrahamic religion, and then built his own story around it to support it. And that's really what that was, right? Because, oh, here's a guy who's, absolutely, illiterate, and I think I can't remember if Muhammad was blind and illiterate, maybe, I think. That's what it was. He was blind and illiterate. So he translates all of this information to his muse, his secretary, his assistant, who writes it all down years and years and years after the actual fact of occurrence. So, none of these things really have much to stand on in terms of trying to call them truly historic events. I don't believe in one of them, frankly. Now, I believe there are events that occurred that were similar, that were overwritten and, rejiggered and brought into the story. Fine, that's been done since the beginning of man, Not a problem, but I don't believe they're actually real. And, you come into the other things, the Mormons and, Scientology and, you can go down all sorts of rabbit holes. And it just gets more bizarre and more bizarre as it goes. And if you really, I challenge anyone to honestly step back and question the rationality of the stories of their religion. I mean, if it's a coat that fits you and you're real comfortable in it and you don't want to mess with it and you want it to carry you to your death, so be it. That's fine. I have no problem with that. That's great. Glad you found something that wraps you so well and covers you so tightly that you feel so warm and snuggly in it. It doesn't for me. But the one thing I will say with any religion is anytime anyone believes for a moment that their religion is the right religion, they are right, you are wrong. Now we've got a problem. Because not one person in one religion on this entire planet can say that. That is simply not sustainable. Every person on this planet is just as likely to have picked the wrong religion or spirituality as the right one. You'll never know until the day you die. And that's just the way it is. So when people start to throw themselves around as if, they know and you don't, oh no, now I really get riled up. The hair on my back of my neck stands up, and I want to charge at that stuff, because that's just flat out wrong. Flat out wrong. You do not impose your personal religious moralities, laws, whatever you want to call them, on other people who do not share your thoughts. You do not have that right. You never have, and you never will. And that is what really irks me most about religion. My uncle, or my wife's uncle, Alfred, the Catholic priest. I mean, he was sweet as cream. We could talk. I mean, I could go upside down and backwards on my, concerns about, the Christian faith. Then he would stand right there with me, and he would come back with his answers and challenge me, and we would go through it. And it was entertaining, and it was enlightening. It's a shame we don't have really good conversations like that. But I've had people in my life tell me if they did not have their religion, they don't know what they would be able to do with their lives. I've had people tell me that without religion, you can't be a good person. Now that's, I find laughable. How I live my life makes no difference to what religion I have. I could be the most pious, gentlest, kindest, caring soul you ever met in your life and not believe in one single ounce of religion. I know people. They're there. So you can't do that. That's just an old wives' tale. You going into a religion because you're either born into it because your parents are doing it and they drag you into it, and your brain kind of gets settled into it. You go to Christian school, Catholic school, whatever it is, and you go through the process. Then you are, to a degree, brainwashed into your system. And if you ever get out of it, or ever want to, you have to do it yourself. You have to go fight it out. Not easy, but that's just the way it goes. So as I face my own death, I have nary a clue what's going to happen. I can kind of envy, the people who think they're going to go see all their dead relatives and so forth in heaven. It's a very pleasant idea. I just don't know that that's going to happen, frankly. But even, if I went to a heaven, I would want to have some really hard talks with God, I'll tell you that. Because half of the stuff that happens on this earth makes no sense whatsoever from a God that would care. What it makes sense of is what? I can't remember their name now. A group of ancient Christians pulled themselves aside and they followed truth. Truth was the answer. Truth was everything. And they came to believe that the God of the Abrahamic Bibles was a human God, a failed God. Not a perfect God, not a divine God that, could never do wrong. But instead they believed, just like in Star Wars, I kid you not, they believed that there was a force that went through everything and connected everything in the universe together. And that force was God. You couldn't talk to it. You couldn't, ask it for things. You couldn't beg of it. You couldn't do anything about it. You just had to live it. And that may be what it is. I don't know. We're going to find out soon enough. Sooner or later, So I just wanted to put that out there, and I don't mean to offend anybody. I have friends who are very religious, and, that's fine. I have no problem with that, so long as we can have, sane, civil, rational discussions upon those topics, right? Like abortion, right? That it doesn't get out of control when we talk about it. As long as we can do that, stay civil, stay there, then come to, understandings, then we're okay. But the minute they start telling me that they're right, I'm wrong, I have to do what they want me to do, or they're going to go to war on me like the old Crusades, now we got a problem. And I'm going to have to really put the hammer down somehow and fight against that. So that's why feelings on religion. So I don't know if you have any questions. You can certainly ask me if you want me to get more specific. But unless I think of something, I will leave it at that as a coverage of what my basic religious and spiritual pathway is or isn't. Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. Peace and hang 10.